Hello guys, welcome to the week number 4 of our course of psycholinguistics. Hope everything is good on your side and wishing you my best for your families, your relatives, yourselves. I really hope everything is not so difficult these days. I know that everything's difficult, but hope you're dealing with that like champs, right? I'm recording this video at a moment of permanent assembly, but if my calculations sort of work out correctly, I think that by the time that you're watching this, you will be already in academic normality somehow, right? So hopefully we can reach certain agreements so we can make up for the time that was employed for the cause and some different things. Okay. Well, as usual, I am going to start the class by sharing with you a poem. This poem is by Cesar Vallejo, who is a Peruvian poet, and it's quite interesting, especially for times like this. This is called El momento más grave de la vida. Un hombre dijo: el momento más grave de mi vida estuvo en la batalla del Marne, cuando fui herido en el pecho. Otro hombre dijo: el momento más grave de mi vida ocurrió en un maremoto de Yokohama, del cual salvé milagrosamente refugiado bajo el alero de una tienda de lacas. Y otro hombre dijo: el momento más grave de mi vida acontece cuando duermo de día. Y otro dijo: el momento más grave de mi vida ha estado en mi mayor soledad. Y otro dijo: el momento más grave de mi vida fue mi prisión en una cárcel del Perú. Y otro dijo: el momento más grave de mi vida es el haber sorprendido de perfil a mi padre. Y el último hombre dijo: el momento más grave de mi vida no ha llegado todavía. I really like it because you can give it a lot of different meanings. Yes, either this guy has not fallen in love, either this guy has not reached some particular goal or objective that he's setting to, or if we want to circle it out a little bit, well, this guy is still alive. Yes, one of the moments of the gravest moments of our lives is when we lose our life, when we lose our life, yes, when we die. So, well, an interesting perspective here. Well, let's start, guys, with our contents of this week. We're going to, where's my water? It's here. Thank you. We're going to what we were discussing in the last session about some ideas about positive reinforcement and many different things provided by Skinner, right? Now, one of the assignments that was given for the last session was that of the punishment, right? That would be like the opposite of positive reinforcement. That would be negative reinforcement. So hopefully I will eventually revise those different things. I will compare how effective you thought that those punishments were or not. Now I am making a gamble right now, and I will say that if I revise all of your different assignments, I will find a big percentage of people who consider that the punishments were ineffective, that didn't work very well, that worked very few, that worked very little, that for many reasons it was not considered effective, right? Well, Skinner just said that, said that punishment is very commonly ineffective, that it doesn't work, that it's not a good idea, right? Well, he had some particular reasons for saying this. So if you go to the slide number 18, you will see some of the reasons of some of the justifications that Skinner provided in order to somehow disqualify the effectiveness of punishment, right? So the first of them is that it produces slower and less learned responses, right? Normally, you would require, and it really depends on the intensity of the punishment, of course, But usually, under normal circumstances, you would require to be punished 2, 3, 4, 5 times before seeing any sort of improvement in your behavior, right? Uh, so think about physical punishment, or think about, deprivation, meaning that you are forbidden to do certain thing that usually produces you pleasure. And well, I mean, this requires repetition of punishments that usually in the first times is ineffective, doesn't work, doesn't convince you to omit the behavior, right? And then this less learned, it means that basically you respond to a certain stimulus, but you don't really learn from it. Yes, let's say somehow you avoid this sort of undesired behavior, but you don't necessarily learn from it. Like different from, think about again the rat and the lever, and how it was possible that the rat eventually determined a lapse of time in which was convenient, like to push this device and obtain the pellet of food. Well, same thing happens in here. Like it doesn't really shows you a paradigm in this case, right? Well, that about the first one. So it's really much slower usually. Let's say that if you increase the intensity of the punishment, so think about a physical punishment for a kid, and I don't know, like a very violent reprimand with belts, or I don't know, with sticks, or with anything that is remotely legal, and that is more violent. Well, maybe after one or two of these really violent punishments, the kid will immediately change, but then this has some other consequences, right? Like some sort of different mental dispositions and behavioral dispositions that doesn't necessarily contribute to the good relationships between the punisher and the punished, right? So that will be for the first one. Now, we have a second reason, and is that the individual tries to avoid the punishment and not the behavior, okay? So basically, if you receive a punishment, what you're going to try to do is eventually to try to avoid this punishment, right? To do whatever you want to do your behavior, and you're going to hide it, and you're going to try to make it unnoticed. So let's imagine that, I don't know, you are a teen, 15, 16, and you started smoking cigarettes, and then of course your parents were either worried or angry, and they assign any punishment for you, whatever punishment. Well, basically what you will try to do is to smoke in places where nobody notices you, or where there's somebody who covers for you, but you are going to try to avoid the punishment. Yes, whatever punishment that is assigned to you, that is the one that you're going to avoid, or try to avoid. The behavior, the negative or undesired behavior, will continue. I mean, as much as you want to do it, you will try to do it. Yes, and that is why it's unlearned. There is not a reasoning of why your behavior is bad or undesirable or not convenient. That could be, for example, explaining what smoke does to your lungs or something like that. But you really are sort of trying to avoid this punishment that is the thing. So you create sort of a double problem, according to Skinner, no? Because basically the subject is going to try to omit or somehow skip this punishment somehow, while maintaining the behavior. Now, the third one, it is a little bit what I have mentioned at the beginning in the first one, when mentioning that probably more intense or more violent punishments will be technically more effective. Well, that is one consequence that we're going to find in the third item over here. It says that the individual associates the displeasing consequences with the punisher and not with the behavior, right? So if, let's say, you are forbidden to go to a party because you're doing really bad on your education, on your school, well, usually the person who is punished is going to complain about the father, the mother, or whatever, because he or she did not allow him to go to this desired party. And he was probably waiting for it and he couldn't go. So he's going to have some sort of resentment, yes, towards the punisher, but never is going to associate it to his bad job on the school. So he will always complain about how unfair and how old-fashioned and how sort of a bad person is his or her parent. But most of the cases he wouldn't say like, oh, I was doing bad at school and that's important and I should have been doing that. Yes. So that's a problem. Yes, because actually it creates this sort of bad feeling or negative, let's say, storage of memories towards the person that assigned the punishment, instead of processing logically somehow that that it was the behavior that was negative or bad or not desirable. Okay. Finally, something quite important, yes, and it's that punishment trains you in what not to do rather than what to do. Yes, and normally, let's say that coming back to the school performance, for example, yes, normally a punishment, even if it's effective, will tell you what not to do. Yes, like not failing the exams, not skipping homework, not skipping classes, or something like that. But a punishment doesn't give you any idea of how to do things better. Yes? So hopefully, let's say that the behavior may improve a little bit, but it doesn't really give you a technique, methodology, or anything to do or to deal with it. Same thing with the smoking example. Like the punishment tells you that smoking is not good, it's something that you shouldn't do. But it doesn't give you any sort of idea or methodology or let's say, alternative to smoking. What else can you do, right? If that is something that you like, it produces some sort of pleasure in your system and makes you feel good, or either you do it because it's, I don't know, a trend, peer pressure. I mean, the punishment doesn't normally give you any sort of technique or alternative to that undesired behavior. So this is Skinner's position towards punishment. I think all of it makes sense somehow. Yes. Nevertheless, it is undoubtful that punishment sometimes it is effective at certain levels. Yes, and I think that we have all experienced that, either as a victim of punishment or as a punisher ourselves, because again, it is undeniable that we as teachers have this sort of power, and even when the golden age of physical abuse, of physical punishment inflicted by teachers with rulers, or with just hitting with the fist on the head, or making them sustain hard heavy books in the middle of the playground, or kneeling on seats. Well, there are a lot of really interesting punishments that were applied for all teachers, and you can talk about that with your mothers or grandmothers or grandfathers or aunts or things like that, and that's a real thing. And undeniably, they were effective at some level, right? I am not saying that they were either good or ethical or human. Nevertheless, they were effective somehow. Again, you have to be really aware that usually a punishment may be effective at one level, but usually brings more trouble than what it's worth, right? So hopefully we can find better ways to stimulate students, children, sons or daughters, or any infant that is under our care. So this is what Skinner said about punishment. Now, for finishing with this, what is somehow the Skinner's contribution to education. Yes, and we're going to see that there are many different things that have been evidently adopted from Skinner's ideas and researches, investigations, and proposals, right? So let's take a look at what we find over here, somehow about the three-stage method. Now, so let's take a look at the slide number 19, and let's read what is in there. It says Skinner's three-stage method has been applied not just to training but to education generally. Teachers decide what they want each child to achieve, and they write down behavioral objectives. So what is more, what is closer to current education than education by goals or by objectives, right? Normally, if you go to school, you find somehow a list of logros, yes, or metas, and this has, this owes a lot to Skinner's contribution, yes. Normally, the skills and the abilities that a student is supposed to achieve in a course, well, they are written and formulated in the shape or in the format of objectives. Yes, and let's take a look at the chart that is in there. There is like a rectangle that has an information. Let's see if this rings a bell. It says, example, by the end of this book you will be able to, right? And then it has like 3 verbs. State a simple definition of psychology. Describe 3 types of work done by psychologists. Contrast psychology with psychiatry and sociology. List at least 7 famous psychologists. Yes? Does it ring a bell? Does it sound like what we find in the bulletins and let's say the grade reports, the marks reports in school? And normally there's this list of things that is expected from a kid. Well, that is a heritage, and nonetheless, of many different educators and pedagogical process and didactics and whatever you want, but Skinner is in there. Yes, every time that we take a look at the bulletins and the grade reports in the schools, well, Skinner is in there. Even there's this description in the end. It says the verbs must be measurable, nothing vague like understand, know, grasp, comprehend. So I don't know if you have had like enough experience with this at your level, but if you're at some point in the school, working as a teacher, you will be facing this, like writing yourselves these different goals or objectives, and you are supposed to make them measurable. They cannot be vague. They cannot be like too general, because you need to be able to measure that, and they eventually should show certain levels of performance, so students can get an excellent or a good or whatever the scale is. In the past it was by numbers, 0 to 5, and then 0 to 10, and then people said that 0, no matter how bad were you at school, you were supposed to have at least a 1, right? Then eventually it was changed by letters, and it was insufficient and acceptable and good and excellent. And then eventually we have some other ones like there are different levels and scales, but the main idea, even though many years have passed, it remains more or less the same. You will tell me if that's good or bad, if that's okay, if you are okay with it. I don't know. That's sort of a subjective perception sometimes. But definitely Skinner was able to provide all these different ideas and somehow let's say things or strategies or scales to education. Okay, So that was it. With this, we're finished with Skinner. Remember that we were sort of providing some different things since the previous session, right? In which we started like discovering or discussing certain things about Skinner and this particular school of thought. What I'm going to ask you right now is to maybe take a look at your notes, or if it's necessary, rewatch the previous video about Skinner or something like that. And what we're going to do is to have this assignment number 1 for this week. So please associate yourselves with other people. We can work, let's say, in groups of maximum 4 people. Again, if you want to work individually, 2, 3, that's fine, but maximum 4. And you are going to think about one class, right? One class that you are having right now, yes, one class that you had in the past, one class that you had in the school, at university, elementary, high school, whatever, right? Just think about that class, and you are going to try to analyze the behavior of the teacher in terms of operant conditioning, right? So what are what were some features or some characteristics of operant conditioning that were present in the class of that teacher, right? You don't need to tell me the name of the teacher, you don't need to tell me any information about what he does. Just try to give me a general idea of what was the class about. So a language class, a math class, a physical education class, yes, that will be enough for me. And mention if it was from school, from high school, from elementary, whatever, right? And you're going to write a little report, I don't know, it really depends on your class, no? But you're going to mention what were those behaviors or those strategies, and why do you think that they belong to this operant conditioning. Maybe because he provided these punishments that were ineffective, or maybe because he provided these rewards somehow, yes. Maybe because he was able to somehow, let's say, do an activity or somehow of repetitive action that in the end condition you like to do something in particular. Well, that's it. It really depends on as I mentioned, on the practices of such teacher. But the important here is like to see some of the behaviors or strategies or techniques or practices in class that you consider that are undeniably operant conditioning. So you just mention the practice that this teacher used to do or does, and mention why do you think it's operant conditioning, right? I am going to ask you to take this in a very open-minded way, yes? Like locating these practices doesn't mean that it is good or bad. It is just part of a school of thought that is actually very relevant, yes? And that still is very used. Remember what I mentioned about the logros, yes, and the grade report. So many teachers still use Skinner's operant conditioning, and that's just fine. It's just a matter of classifying, no more. Not judging if it's good or bad, or if you like it or not. That's not the point here, okay? The point is being able to locate these practices, okay? So hopefully it is clear enough. Remember that I am not I'm not going to, starting this week, I will just mention the instruction on the videos. I will not write anything in the, let's say, in the assignments themselves. I will write very general instructions. So hopefully, well, this explanation was clear because it's the only one that you're going to have for carrying out the assignment. Okay. So thank you very much. Remember to share the comments when I evaluate the assignments. I normally write the grade and the comments for only one of the students, and he or she is supposed to share with the rest because the rest will only see the grade, nothing more. And those comments sometimes, most of the times, are relevant in terms of improving or just congratulations or something like that. So it's good to share that. So thank you very much, and see you on the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.